Hello everyone, my name is Tiara Brooks, and here at School-Based Health Alliance, we would like to thank everyone for attending today's webinar. The LIJ COAST Project, Creating Optimism After Sandy Trauma in Far Rockaway, New York. During today's presentation, our presenters will describe the 3 tiers used for the project and share a special youth-created videos. But before we begin, we have a few housekeeping reminders. First, please help us with our attendance count. If you are viewing as a group, please go to the chat window in the question box and type in the name of the person registered and the total number of additional people in the room. For example, Tammy Jones +3. This will help us with our final attendance count. Also, all attendees are in listen-only mode. However, we want to hear your questions. To ask a question at any point during the webinar, please use the question box located in your GoToWebinar control window. We will address questions following the presentation. At the end of this webinar, attendees will be asked to complete evaluation poll questions. Please let us know how we are doing. Your feedback is vital in helping us craft presentations that will meet your needs. This webinar is being recorded and will be archived on our website in 3 to 5 business days. Please also visit School-Based Health Alliance for additional archive webinars for topics such as the ones you are currently viewing on your screen. Now I would like to introduce you to our presenters today. Dr. Roderick is a clinical psychologist who has been part of the SBHC program at Northwell Health since 2003. Northwell's SBHC team received funding from NYS for trauma-related services post-Superstorm Sandy. Dr. Roderick specializes in providing evidence-based cognitive behavioral therapy. And Mr. Silva joined the SBHC at Northwell Health in 2001 at the Brooklyn site in 2010. She joined the Far Rockaway team where she coordinates mental health and pregnancy prevention services. Thank you, everyone. I would now like to turn it over.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Tiara. This is Helena Roderick speaking. I'm sitting here with Marianne Da Silva, and we're very excited to be able to speak to everyone today. We're presenting on a version of our presentation that was also delivered at the annual convention this year. Our presentation, as it was introduced, is titled the North Shore LIJ COAST Project, Creating Optimism After Sandy Trauma in Far Rockaway, New York. And that's actually the name of our health system, North Shore LIJ, which has changed its name to Northwell Health. COAST is an acronym, which we will explain shortly, and Far Rockaway, New York is where our clinic is located. Neither myself nor Marianne have any personal financial relationships or commercial interests that are related to this presentation, so there's no financial relationships to disclose today. Again, we're very excited to be here with everyone who's on the call. We're going to start today's presentation just talking briefly about what we're looking to accomplish over this next hour, what learning objectives we seek to achieve today. We're going to begin our presentation exploring needs. What were the needs that we encountered in the community of Far Rockaway and Queens after Superstorm Sandy? What was the trauma-informed, multi-tiered mental health service project that we developed to meet those needs? And we will walk through, step by step, tier by tier, this comprehensive program that was developed and implemented. To do that, we are actually going to start by describing the trauma-informed youth development activities. Then we'll move to our second tier, which is the parent and teacher workshops that were implemented. And we're going to wrap up with talking about the mental health screening, assessment tools, and treatment interventions that were implemented after the storm. So that's kind of a roadmap for where we're headed today. We're actually going to start with just a brief background for those who might be less familiar with the school-based health center model. Obviously, the role of school-based health centers are for comprehensive services. We are designed to meet specific physical, specific behavioral health needs of the young people within the community. We'll talk about Far Rockaway as a community in a moment. School-based health centers are designed to provide all enrolled students with confidential, culturally sensitive, and youth-oriented family planning, medical, mental health, and health education services at no out-of-pocket cost to their families. We work collaboratively as a staff with the clinic and the school hand in hand. We want to be more than a partner with the school, truly integral to the functioning of the school. And you'll see that as we go through the presentation, that aspects of the COAST initiative, aspect of our 3 tiers were woven in so that there really could be an integral feel of the school working with the clinic and vice versa. And certainly we invite questions at the end of the presentation if you'd like to explore more how we made that kind of organically originate. So then I'll talk about our health system briefly. Again, I said at the beginning, we are part of a health system that changed its name recently. We were North Shore LIJ when we initiated the COAST project, and now as we're speaking to you today, our organization is called Northwell Health. Our linkages to school-based health go back to the 1980s. So at that time, North Shore University Hospital opened 2 school-based health centers in Far Rockaway, Queens, New York. For those of you who don't know Queens, it is perhaps one of the most diverse counties on the planet. And Far Rockaway is a unique community. In these 2 clinics, they were at Freck and Brian Piccolo Middle School. So Freck used to be Far Rockaway High School, just another entity that has changed its name over the years. And Brian Piccolo Middle School is now a building that is a campus as well, with multiple schools located in that campus. Our mission of our health system, our mission of our school-based health center program in particular, is to provide high-quality, primary, preventative care to students regardless of their ability to pay. Obviously, we're emphasizing addressing the health needs, the health education needs of the individual that comes into our clinic. We also think about their family and their community at large. And hopefully that too will be evident as we look at the 3 tiers of our program, how we tailor things individually to the family and to the community. From the outset, our program has always been geared to a full spectrum of services, that we are thinking about prevention, we are thinking about intervention and treatment, and that those are all exceedingly valuable components to what we do. And again, that will be very evident in the 3 tiers. Our services and programs have always included individual services, group services, family therapy. There is a pregnancy prevention grant that's been in place from New York State Department of Health. This grant goes back to the year 2005. We were just renewed actually very recently for another 5-year cycle. And the work that the CAP program does in pregnancy prevention has actually informed our development of the trauma services that we're going to talk about today. So let's speak about Far Rockaway, this community. Far Rockaway is a community in need. I don't have a map in front of you, so please kind of visualize New York State. We're here on the northeastern seaboard, and Far Rockaway is on a peninsula. It is geographically isolated from our greater New York City area. And it was a place where in the face of the storm, the ocean and the bay tragically met across the peninsula. So Far Rockaway was one of the coastal communities in New York that was hardest hit when Superstorm Sandy made landfall back in 2012. And obviously this time of year is a very sensitive time with the storm that's going on right now, Matthew, that has affected the Caribbean and is moving into Florida and Georgia. And in fact, I think there's evacuations that are in place right today. Prior to the storm, Far Rockaway has had very significant social, very significant economic disparities. So we won't spend extensive time in today's presentation going through those concerns, but I just put a few examples just as bullets to kind of highlight the risks of the population, to highlight the diversity. So at Freck, we're looking at a population served by the school-based health center that is 57% African American. Also, there's a strong and growing Hispanic population. And at the last time we accessed our statistics, we were looking at 84% that were entitled to free lunch. Brian Piccolo Middle School is a similar statistic, largely African American, a growing Hispanic population, and almost 100% of the student body are entitled to free lunch, which gives us some sense of the poverty of the population. So we had these pre-existing demographic socioeconomic challenges. Then the storm hit. So we had a population with high needs, and then when the storm came in, their capacity for resilience or capacity for recovery was really severely tested by the storm's impact. So as I said, it is this time of year, 4 years ago, that we were facing the issues from Superstorm Sandy. Just to go through a few quick statistics on what the scope was. Sandy was the largest Atlantic hurricane on record, spanning over 1,000 miles. If we look at the U.S. in particular, Sandy affected 24 states, and that was literally the entire eastern seaboard, reaching from Florida all the way to Maine, and then also extending quite west. So I have a satellite map up on our slide. So the storm was as far west as Michigan and Wisconsin. This was, in fact, the second costliest hurricane in U.S. history to date, second only to Katrina. And if you look at it in terms of dollars and cents, the damages were assessed to have surpassed $75 billion, and again, surpassed only by Hurricane Katrina. I'm now going to turn the speaker over to Mary Ann, and she's going to talk a little more about Far Rockaway in particular, as it was affected by Sandy.
Thank you, Helena. Hi, everyone. So Sandy hit Far Rockaway on October 29th, 2012. And the immediate devastation, of course, was loss of heat, hot water, electricity. And we were going to hear from our students for weeks and months after about the long lines that they had to wait on to charge their cell phones. We would hear from parents about, trying to get food and to get warm clothes, but of course our kids were very concerned about not being able to charge their cell phones. And then weeks after, our schools reopened, and many students returned to school, but many didn't, because some moved off the peninsula. They moved to different areas in New York, moved to live with families in other areas, and didn't return. And school, of course, is a place of normalcy, so for weeks and months after, we continued as normal, or as best as we could. But school staff were reporting for months and years after, actually, that things had changed. Teachers would stop me in the hallway and say, this student is different, or this has changed. There were even some principals and staff that were not the same after, because they were affected too by the storm. And one of my favorite stories, well, not favorite actually, this is one of the stories that I remember very, to this day, because the mother who talked about watching the water rise in her yard with her kids. She's in her house watching the water come to the first floor, and then they moved to the second floor, and she held her children and said prayers, and they were just waiting, and all she could think about was what she saw on TV back in Katrina, and how the families had died in their attics trying to escape, and she thought that was the fate for her and her children that day. But thankfully, that's not what happened. This is a picture of, there were 80 homes that burnt down that day in the Rockaways, and this is one of the pictures with the fire truck. Our boardwalks were washed away for miles and miles, actually. And they're just still now repairing those boardwalks. So what did we do right after? I mean, of course, there was a sense of what do we do? And we were thankful for the NCTSN website because we went immediately to the psychological first aid, which is a 6-hour interactive course. And all our staff did this training. And it really helped, I guess, censored us and give us direction on what to do. We have the 8 core actions there. Number 1, contact and engagement, and that right away our schools had moved to different areas in Queens, and we went out to visit and to meet the staff and see what they needed and what we can do to help. And then practical assistance, for example, number 5, our social workers went out and we were able to give out socks to check on patients that we knew lived in, for example, the NYCHA buildings. We had like diabetic patients in some of those apartments to check on them and see what we could do to help out. And then, of course, number 8, the last, linkage on collaborative services, working with other agencies to see how we can help families. So we highly recommend this as a training because it was helpful. I'll say for myself, it definitely was helpful with direction. And then Helena mentioned the CAP program, our pregnancy prevention program. So that summer right after, we hired a photographer and we had our Summer After Sandy program. And the photographer trained our young people how to use the camera, and then they were given cameras to go around the community and to take pictures of how Sandy impacted the community. That was the summer of 2013. This picture is actually my favorite picture. And the reason that was taken by one of our students, and I call this student the Wi-Fi student because I like to share this story because immediately after he came back to school and we talked about what had happened and how Sandy had affected him, his biggest worry and concern or upset was that he had lost Wi-Fi. And at first everyone laughed and we thought it was funny and it was a joke, but it really was not funny to him. He told us that too. It wasn't funny. He was traumatized by that because this was a young man who was struggling with his sexuality, and his home was very uncomfortable for him. It was full of a lot of conflict and tension, and him being able to reach out to his friends was a big deal. So losing Wi-Fi and not having phone and not being able to have that contact, it was devastating for him for a couple of days. Actually, I want to read what he said about this picture. He said, this is a picture of there's a favorite park near the school here, and this is where he took this picture. And he said, the basin in the Bayswater Park was once clean. There was nothing but sand under the water. After Sandy, the bottom became eroded. And I can't see what it says there. When you look down, you could see bottle caps, garbage, rocks, and they were all the results from this storm. He says, now when you look at the pond, grass is growing, and what it says is that even though the environment has changed, the plants are trying to go back and make the basin beautiful again. We have these pictures hanging in our clinic, by the way. I'll turn it back over to Helena.
So yes, Marianne kind of described how right after the storm there was this project with the photographer. So there was a period where we did not have a trauma-specific program in place just yet. And so we were trying to be innovative and to meet the needs of our community as best we could with projects that were already in place as we were taking the next steps and putting into place a trauma-focused program. So that's what we have here. It took until July of 2014, and that's when we were able to begin our Coast project. And we were able to maintain this project through December of 2015 with our New York State funding. And it was a long road to get it off the ground. We took, I don't know if it's comfort or not, but we certainly were aware that for years after Hurricane Katrina, many young people continued to experience symptoms related to the storm for years after the hurricane. So we knew that with helping our young people after Sandy, even though it took some time for our trauma grant to kick in, that there was still going to be an important place for our programming to help the community recover. So again, we kind of bridged things as best we could with the CAP summer program, with the photography, with working, as Marianne illustrated, with the NCTSN materials. And then in summer 2014, we were really able to start with our COAST project. Marianne describes her memories of us sitting on the floor of my office, kind of ground up developing what this program was going to be. I'm sure everybody in school-based health can kind of share similar memories of times where they've rolled up their sleeves in a real grassroots kind of way and put things together. So we came up with this acronym sitting there on the floor for COAST, and it is stuck now for these years. So our project was creating optimism after Sandy trauma. I think actually when we first concocted the idea, it was amidst Sandy trauma, and as time went on in terms of the funding chain, we realized the word after was just as applicable and worked for the acronym. In the photograph, you'll see some of our cute incentives that we designed as a program, that we designed with Young People's Help, that we were able to give out to young people and their families. So those are keychains. And they have a flashlight component. So certainly flashlights were one of those items that were needed for safety purposes. I also think a keychain is very anchoring and gives a sense of safety as well. And these were just some of the giveaways and the items that we designed to help kind of outreach to young people, catch the eyes of them and their families and the school community, so that we could have that buy-in to then launch our other aspects of our programming. As I mentioned from the outset when we talked about our learning objectives for today, the program that we developed, the COAST model, has 3 tiers. And so we're going to move into talking about them in turn. We felt essentially we needed the background of youth development and resiliency building. That's the bottom tier on our pyramid that supports everything else, and that's in the green color. The green color sort of representing that this was for everyone. You did not have to be raising any red flags in any way to be plugged into Tier 1 programming. And I think that's really important. We found that really important work throughout COAST, and we certainly hope that other sites keep that in mind as they develop programming after natural disasters. There's a really important place for youth development and resiliency building activities. So that was our most universal piece. Then we realized we wanted to tailor some opportunities for parents and for teachers, for the adults. And partially we wanted to have those opportunities to find a way to bridge from programs that are totally universal to programs that are quite clinical in nature. And we thought no one was really better equipped in our community than parents and teachers to help flag for us who's at risk, who's in need of more intensive services. And we wanted to empower those parents and teachers because they too were affected by the storms. So we offered various programs for them that Marianne will describe shortly. And the idea was to help raise their skills, raise their knowledge base for them as victims, and then also to help identify young people who were important to reach for Tier 3. So Tier 3 is literally at the top of our pyramid, and we have several components in our implementation of Tier 3. There was individual therapy, that was evidence-based programming. Then we had group therapy, again, evidence-based programming. And finally, we had psychiatric resources. So we were able to have psychiatrists and psychiatric nurse practitioners at other sites who were able to do evaluations and prescribe medications as necessary. So that was the most clinical. The smallest numbers were for psychiatry and for therapy. And as I said, Tier 1, we really tried to open that up to as large of a community as we could. I know school-based health centers are always challenged for funding, for staffing. So we wanted to put up a slide to really thank all of our collaborators through our school-based health center program, but also to help illustrate what is involved. What kind of staffing might you need if you are really trying to put together a multi-tier or comprehensive program? We're very fortunate. We have our medical director that oversees all of our school-based health center sites, and that was Dr. Carmine. Then we had our mental health team who were very involved. So one of our social workers, Heidi, agreed to take on added duties as we developed COAST as the program coordinator. Mary Ann, who's presenting with me today, is our senior social worker here in the Far Rockaways. So obviously Mary Ann played a very key role in getting COAST off the ground and seeing it through. We had a social worker at our Brian Piccolo Middle School site whose work was dedicated to providing services there. And it's a smaller campus, so she was the one and only social worker wearing many hats, as I'm sure we can all relate to. Our psychiatrist was only available in a limited scope, but as I mentioned, she played a very key role for the young people who really needed that aspect of service that no one else could provide. For myself, I'm actually a senior psychologist that I'm based elsewhere at our other sites, but I was able to come in and provide whatever resources were needed through our team meetings, through dealing with data and screenings and whatever kind of we needed to see this project through from soup to nuts. We were very fortunate that we had a health educator who we could plug into this program, who had worked in pregnancy prevention and was very willing and able to take on the health education tasks that COAST entailed. So that was very fortunate that we had Tiara on our team. And then, of course, there's all the behind-the-scenes things that need to happen and the behind-the-scenes individuals. So we had a program manager who was helping with the finance piece, which is no small task, as I'm sure, again, everybody knows. And even our receptionists, very, very key people. I think our nurse practitioners might be disappointed that I don't have their names on the slide, so I should certainly put in a quick shout out to our medical team. As anybody in school-based health knows, the medical team can often unearth mental health concerns, flag them, and do a beautiful handoff to our mental health team, who can then kind of delve deeper and see what services are needed to help that traumatized young person. So truly and honestly, a team effort, as is everything we do in school-based health.
Hi again, it's Marianne. So as Helena said, our Tier 1 was we cast a wide net. And on our high school campus, or our FREC campus, we have about 1,700 students, and at the middle school about 600 students. So a lot of our Tier 1 activities happened in the lunchroom, lunchtime. And our rationale, of course, was positive youth development and building those protective factors. And we are very passionate about providing teen-friendly services to our young people. So here is an example of one of our campaigns, and this is one of our peer leadership, our service learning program. The peer leaders were very involved with the middle school students. This is one of the anti-bullying campaigns. They would meet weekly during their lunch periods, and they would plan activities. It would be psychoeducation and activities plan, and then they would implement those activities or those education to the rest of the cafeteria or their students. Here's another example of some of the monthly topics, campaign topics. So for example, it's October Depression Screening Month, again this month, and you know, we would first do some psychoeducation with our small groups on depression, and then ask them, what would you like your peers to know? And then they would plan a cafeteria-wide campaign, and then by the end of the month, have something to go out with to the whole lunch group and do. And students actually enjoyed that a lot. The middle school students did very well with that program. This is an example of a bulletin board, for example. Relationship was always a big deal, and not just with the highest intimate relationships, but the mother-daughter relationship, friendship relationships, and so on. So bulletin boards were a lot of fun to do also in the cafeteria and in our waiting room as well. Of course, yoga was a favorite, and teachers loved the yoga. The students loved the yoga, and surprisingly, we learned that lots of boys like yoga too. And we worked with the health education classes and hip Dharma yoga program that we had worked with before with the CAP program, the pregnancy prevention, and she has expertise to work with inner city youth and survivors of trauma, so we loved having her back for this particular project. And again, surprisingly, boys liked yoga. And I don't know if other sites are struggling with this, but we tend to get a lot of the girls in for all types of programs and a little bit more difficult with the boys. So I really want to emphasize that surprisingly, boys like yoga. All right, so my media life is an connected health solutions, and the videos that we're going to show at the end is from this company. Kenny and his team were amazing, and they're a behavior change program, and using social media and digital film. And the PSAs at the end you'll see is what was produced from this program with My Media Life. And we had a middle school program, and we had a high school program that we did in the summer. So Tier 2, Parents and Teacher Workshops. So again, with the NCTSN resources, we were giving out a lot of brochures and information from that website, and very good information, easy to print. Our mother-daughter workshop was a big hit. This is what a picture is actually from one of the mother-daughter workshops, and this was the first time. We have 4 schools on our campus here and 2 middle schools, and it was the first time that we were able to get the 2 middle schools to collaborate and do an event together. So it was a big deal. Then we did staff workshops, and I have to say that the workshop that really, we did the teacher workshops and so on, but the workshop that I remember left an impression on me, and I think they were most appreciative, Helena, you were there, was the workshop with safety agents. And they said no one ever thinks of us, and they interact with the students all the time. And so we did a workshop how to identify trauma, to recognize, and how to also refer. And they were very appreciative. So I'm so glad that we were able to do that for them. And then we invited Dr. Alyssa Brown, who is a national expert professor at St. John's. And she did a workshop recognizing trauma in the classroom that we were able to invite all the schools here on the peninsula, and also we had other schools and agencies on the peninsula. People off the peninsula and on the peninsula also come to that workshop. It was an auditorium-style big workshop. And then we invited Dr. Jonathan Fader, who is he's a sports psychologist for the Mets. And that was an important part, because when we were trying to sell this to the schools, it was one of a workshop with teachers in the school. When we were trying to sell it to principals, saying that got a lot of interest, that he's a sports psychologist for the Mets. So he came in and did a very dynamic workshop in the classroom on motivational interviewing. So taking care of our students. Throughout the time also, we worked with teachers just about, whatever was needed. And I think we were a resource for teachers on this campus, worked very closely with guidance counselors, and again, being able to give them resources. Here's one of the resources that we got, again, from the NTCSN website. The go-to kits, and here's some other online resources that we wanted to share with all of you. and I believe this is going to be available to everybody at the end or in a couple of weeks. So these are where we were able to get some resources and find them very valuable. I'm going to pass that back to Helena.
So Marianne got to kind of cover the most fun aspects of the program with Tier 1 and Tier 2. So there was a lot of fun things that were happening for the young people with the videos and the yoga and the peer leaders activities during the lunchrooms and the cafeterias. And then, you know, families got these great Go kits with all these supplies. Teachers had resources and motivational lectures. But of course, this was also a clinical program we were doing in Coast. So there were screenings that were conducted in order to identify young people who were going to be in need of our clinical care. And we did these in a great way. There were hundreds and hundreds. So things were done in classrooms and the clinic waiting area, all different opportunities where we could interface with young people, have them fill out our screener, and then see if additional assessments were needed. We were very fortunate, and I think I need to really say that throughout our presentation, we felt very fortunate. So we had connections to our sponsoring institution and their Department of Psychiatry. We had Dr. D'Amico from the Department of Psychiatry who was partnering on our Coast project and doing his own components in Long Beach. And Dr. D'Amico and his team had been part of Project Liberty. So they were able to take the post 9/11 screening tool that was then utilized after Hurricane Katrina and then bring it to us for the New York City Coast post-standing screening. So this was a tool that was evolved over the years for natural disasters, and other crises that developed in recent years. And so the screening tool, you can find a lot of information on it through NCTSN, but really looked at the people's experiences, their need for assistance, and various mental health indicators. It doesn't lead to a diagnosis, but it just lets you know if further assessment is going to be needed. So when there were positive screenings, we would then do subsequent assessments with young people in a one-on-one kind of way. The Child PTSD Symptom Scale was utilized, the CPSS, the CDI, the Beck Depression Inventory for the older youth in the project, the SDQ, Strengths and Difficulties Questionnaire, and then the CRAFT was done to check in on substance abuse issues. So the CPSS is available from FOA and colleagues, and you can get a total score for the PTSD symptoms, and then you also have access to subscales that map onto DSM-IV criteria. And I have the link for where this resource is available. The CDI and the BDI, we were interested in these tools so that we weren't just looking at trauma symptoms, but also depressive symptoms. And these tools we had to purchase in order to implement them in our project. But obviously, they're kind of the gold standards for depression assessment. But as Marianne had kind of told these stories about the community and how it was impacted by the storm, we realized that we needed to look at problem behaviors as well. So we had the SDQ that looked at conduct, hyperactivity, and attention, and that's a free resource. We had the CRAFT to look at substance abuse concerns, and that was our comprehensive screening packet. The young people who scored at a high enough level or for whom there was a strong other set of indicators that treatment was needed, we offered them our interventions. So we use CBITS, the Cognitive Behavioral Intervention for Trauma in Schools, in order to deliver groups to our young people here. The beautiful thing about CBITS and how we implemented it was that, for instance, at FREC, there was a pre-existing support group called Girl Code. And when screened and when assessed, all those young people had needs that this ready-made group was able to transform then into a more therapeutic group. So that was really very fortunate that we could do that, that the girls were ready and willing and able to do that. And it's a wonderful program with a lot of hands-on CBT activities to teach them wonderful skills. For individual treatment, we had trauma-focused CBT, and of course there's an online training for that. Dr. D'Amico is also a master trainer, so that was of great benefit to us. We were lucky, fortunate again, to be trained by Adelphi and Dr. Kagan in the Real Life Heroes intervention. And this is on your slide, a photograph of a painting Marianne and her patient did through Real Life Heroes. So Marianne worked with this young person who had a lot of difficulty expressing herself and dealing with her trauma. And through the creative arts was able to kind of tap in and address these symptoms kind of through that backdoor creative approach. And if you see on her painting, she's talking about like some interpersonal traumas. And that happens a lot with our young people, that they're multiply traumatized. They're not just impacted by the storm, they're in a high-risk community with a lot of interpersonal traumas. And when you're working with them after the storm, you need to kind of address whatever traumas come up, whatever really needs to be tackled. So there were a lot of interpersonal issues coming out that we could face with the young people via TFCBT and Real Life Heroes. So I want to just wrap up to a few lessons before we watch the wonderful videos that our young people created. I want to just really emphasize that Tiers 1 and Tiers 2, these destigmatizing, engaging programs, were so important in order to help our Tier 3 outcomes. We felt you really needed that in order to achieve what we did in the clinical interventions. Obviously, this was a community with a lot of previous trauma. Having the access for young people of the services right here at their school was amazing. And so to quote some of the post-Hurricane Katrina recovery research, although schools' mission is to educate, schools may offer many children their only window of opportunity to recover from the negative effects of trauma. And so we felt very fortunate that we could be here for our young people. Marianne is, I think, going to take it over now just to show the short videos that our students created.
And so I'm not going to show the first one, What is My Media Life, but here's the link for everyone if you want to see that. But I'm going to switch right to, so at our middle school, there's a two-part video because the young people, we ended up getting a group of Spanish-speaking kids and then another group, and they had to really work out all the issues before they could even get to the video, so to making the PSA. So here is the pre, and then
oh my God,
sorry, hold on.
My name is Steve Mitchell. I live in Far Rockaway, New York, and I got an MS-53. Well, some people wrote down here, the smell, the weather, they had no heat, no light, destroyed houses, it was wind. Everything was cold. Everybody looked like zombies waiting in lines for food. When the ocean met the bay, it was just like everything was destroyed. Now that we back on our feet, everybody's starting to get back to work and everything. Life's starting to get better. We started working on discrimination because a lot of discrimination happened after Hurricane Sandy. Que las personas le hacen más dinero, como entonces a ellos los trataban como más, pero como nosotros no teníamos dinero, entonces como nosotros me daban razón.
Honestly, I was really concerned about the group at first, especially not knowing beforehand which kids were going to be in it. And then getting to the group and seeing that it was pretty much an even split between the English-speaking kids and the Spanish-speaking kids, and knowing previously that there was a little bit of conflict. I was concerned that they would never get to the point that they kind of meshed. The language barrier is really hard, and they're not patient.
You just stay here and laugh and have a little five conversation to know to participate in nothing. That's not really good. You have a secret. What kind of discrimination did you see in our group? With the Spanish speakers, because they didn't speak, they don't speak English. Like, they were speaking Spanish while we were
talking to the director and they were asking stuff and it was just like, that's mad disrespectful.
We talked a lot about the Spanish people because like their parents when they first came in was just like, we don't care about them. Like you don't have to say it, but we can see your facial expressions. Like how many times y'all gonna talk about us, and then when we be like, what did y'all say? They be like, nothing. Like
All they're doing is playing around.
And why do you think? So why do you think that is? Do you think? What do you think?
Because like they
Think they're being lazy?
I think that we hear what they're saying. It was like two groups getting discriminated at the same time because they will laugh and talk around when we were talking, like when we speak, and we will laugh around and joke around when they speak. So it was like it was happening at the same time. Yeah.
it was just like the cultures were totally different because some people felt like where they come from was like viewed different because as far as the discrimination, like the Spanish people was there, and then we had the English speakers. So it was just like when we was trying to talk, it was just like we wasn't on the same page because we wasn't understanding each other, right?
Discrimination works with races. Discrimination works with religions. Discrimination works with just the way you present yourself. You don't never say, I don't like the way that person is acting or whatever, because you don't know where they come from. You never know a person until you sit down and speak with them.
Racism is based on power. Racism is when laws are set by government to stop people from doing things that other people can do. You couldn't vote because you were black. You couldn't sit in a certain part of a bus or a restaurant or go in through the front door because you were black. Yeah, he just said racism actually still exists. Yes, it does. So racism is a more powerful thing. Now, the other way of looking at it is prejudice. Caprice, judge. I'll judge you before I even know you. If I don't like you, I don't want to sit next to you, I don't have the power to get you out of the school. I'll just have to sit at another table. That's the difference between prejudice and racism. An individual can be prejudiced. They can say a lot of mean things. But racism is really based on power. When you're stopping somebody to do something, to live a certain way because of their religion, because of their skin color, because of where they live in the planet, then that's about power. So the important thing is that we still need to come together and we still need to work. This right here is work. This was Dr. King's dream for all of us to come together. Not just black and white, but black, Latino, Asian, Indian, all of us to come together. But it isn't just my rights, it's our rights. Human rights, civil rights, exactly. Y aquí, aunque no son todos amigos, se empiezan a desarrollar una manera de tener comunidad. Y en tener esa comunidad vale la confianza que tienen en comunidad. So what I'm trying to say is that you guys have a special group here. This is not like any other group in the rest of the school. You guys were selected to be a part of this group. So this space has to be a space that brings trust with each other. And the last thing it should do is point fingers at each other. And it has to be a space that no matter what you say, how you feel, you should feel comfortable to say it. Because you guys are trying to send a positive message, not just to each other in this classroom, right, to the whole world. And if you can't be positive with each other in this room, then how can you create a positive message that you want to share with the entire planet?
We just spoke Spanish for a decent amount of time. How was that for you guys sitting here not knowing what was going on? I think it's disrespectful. Did you feel disrespected or frustrated?
I feel frustrated.
You feel frustrated. So let's make that correction, right? Because what's the difference between... Say that again. Talk about this. All the time. Well, all the time, though. I mean, that's just... So imagine how they feel all the time when we feel like that just right now. When we were talking in the group, and the Spanish speakers, we feel empathy for them because once all of them start speaking Spanish and the director started speaking Spanish, while we were talking, we felt how they felt. We wanted to know what they were talking about. Like, we didn't know if they were saying something else or they were talking about what we were talking about. We put ourselves in their shoes. We felt how they felt. Yeah, okay.
What you said? Yeah, they feel the exact same way. You guys are disrespecting them when you're speaking to them in English and not acknowledging their correct yourself.
We're making it feel to like show that we should have more empathy in somebody. Don't discriminate against others for being themselves. Empathy is when you instead of like oh say I'm sorry that you feel like that, it's for feeling how they feel, like putting yourself in their shoes. What do you think about discrimination? It's wrong. Why is it wrong? Think about discrimination. That it's not fair. Why isn't it fair at all? Because people cannot be judged based on what they believe in. Alright, so Ms. Murphy, how do you feel about discrimination?
Everybody needs to spend more time learning about other cultures, differences between people, and then also what unites us, what brings us together, what's the same.
At the very end, it's called an epiphany. An epiphany is when a character discovers something. It's the end of the story, right? So at the end, you realize, oh, I shouldn't have called it that name. But right now, you're like, okay.
When their group comes up, they're going to say in Spanish, look at these guys. They always think that they're so much smarter than us, and then they'll just start laughing.
Oh yeah, that's when I start feeling bad.
Right.
You're like,
You're already feeling bad, and then they come and they say something in Spanish, and when they all they think, right, isn't that what you did in the group when they speak Spanish?
Once we started getting more involved in the group and whatever we had to do, it was just like maybe we do connect in some type of way, and maybe we can be friends from things that happened in the past with us. So that we crashed at one point, but we started understanding each other, which brought us back together.
I think there's a lot more learning to be done, but to hear them starting to talk about it in a way that shows that little bit of understanding coming out is exciting for me. I think learning about discrimination is something that they're used to, but I think teaching them now more about empathy and feeling for each other is something that they don't necessarily get all the time.
just somebody because they don't speak your language, just somebody because they don't look like you, just somebody because they don't have as much money, just because they don't do, like, they're not you, don't mean that you have to judge them. At the end of the day, if you group up with them, you actually get to know who they are. They're really cool people.
If we're able to still connect with the people who don't speak English, then I feel like if we could grow that bond with them that we have, and we could spread it through the school, like through the 8th grade, 7th grade, and then to the 6th grade, then we could bring it outside of school. Because before I didn't have no hope in the group, like, oh, where are we going to go? But now it's just like, since I see that a change is actually happening, I think we can actually spread it from the school to the street.
So because of time, we'll pause there. But that was the, we'll have the links for everyone to see the video that they made, the PSA that they made right after that, and then the one from the high school this summer, the following summer.
Let's suppose that you're writing a really important email to a colleague. Or a post on Facebook that all your friends will see.
Okay. So we have some links here with resources for everyone. And then our last slide, next step.
So when we do this presentation in person, we ask for some messages that we can bring back to our community. So we thought that was important to do today as well. So please feel free to reach out via email and send us any kind of messages you'd like to share with our participants back here in Far Rockaway, New York. We want to thank everyone for really listening for these 55 minutes that we've been talking. We really, really invite you to please look at the young people's videos. They're really amazing. They're short. And I think we have to turn it back to Tiara now to help us with the questions.
Yes. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Yes, we want to give everyone now the opportunity. If you have any questions, please enter your questions in the question box. And while we're giving everyone that opportunity to enter their questions, we just have a few announcements. The School-Based Health Alliance works to improve the health status of children and youth by advancing and advocating for school-based health care. Our members extend and support our work Trainings like this webinar would not be possible without support of our members. We ask that you guys just please join us and visit our website at www.sbhforall.org/membership. And also, call for abstracts is now open for our 2017 National School-Based Healthcare Convention in Long Beach, California. The deadline is November 6th, so please visit sbhforall.org for more information. Okay, so now we're just going to announce any of the questions that we have today and share with everyone. So our first question we have is, what school-wide and community change has taken place since starting this project?
That's an excellent question. I think it's hard to really lay that bedrock of lasting changes. So we have data that we just can't release because of IRB kind of issues, but definitely our Long Beach team will release some data of outcomes that we can say at the individual level. Trauma symptoms were alleviated, depressive symptoms were alleviated. So certainly on that individual level, there's very concrete indicators of change.
And I also feel that the relationships we built with the school are still ongoing, and we're building on those relationships still. You know, because of the funding and the program that we were able to produce, the schools expect, I think, you know, certain programs from us now, and so we continue to try to fulfill and provide those programs and services, even though the course is over, but we're still continuing those relationships and trying to provide some of those services.
And we try to build bridges, so there are go kits that people could use as the incoming storms every year arrive. The tools, like the young people in their video, they will never forget that they were a part of this amazing video. So there's an empowerment piece that we hope will carry on, and I think it's hard to measure. But I mean, you can see it visually in their videos, and it's something we take a lot of pride in.
And I've also joined coalitions in the community that are continuing to work post-Sandy.
Okay, great, thank you. Our next question is, for students screened that needed intense intervention, were referrals made outside of the SBHC?
So we did what we could within the school-based health center to provide a lot of intensive services. I think having the psychiatry, the individual therapy, and the groups were amazing. But absolutely referrals were made out as needed. So if ER interventions were needed, if more intensive family work was needed, absolutely. And there were some young people where the families didn't want to receive the services through COAST, and we generated referrals. Absolutely. It's really essential for SBHCs to have that flexibility.
Yes, referral. You know, again, like for example, at our middle school where we have one social worker there, and we were doing all these screenings, you know, and identifying young people with need, we absolutely had to refer out into the community.
Okay, perfect, thank you. A last question, beyond the mother-daughter workshop, were there programs or resources for students and parents to work through their trauma together?
I think we were here at the parent-teacher night and the PTA kind of events to definitely try to raise the awareness. But in terms of working together in a real ongoing way, what Marianne said is right. There was a lot of referrals to family therapy. We had hoped to have a lot more funding to do a lot of hands-on therapeutic opportunities with parents. And we just didn't have that extra bit of funding to hire the more staff. So the focus was more on the individual young people, just since we are based here at the schools. It's an excellent question, and I think that's what we would hope in future initiatives to do more of that, absolutely.
Perfect, thank you. And we are at the top of the hour, and I see there are a few questions regarding the slides and the resources and the wonderful videos. We will definitely provide those videos in the follow-up email and the resources that were provided with our presenters. So everyone will get that information with all the slides that you will see today in our presentation. Is there any additional information you want to add before we go to our poll questions?
Please email us if you have any questions. Be happy to respond.
And I know the young people would be thrilled if you would watch their videos and comment online. It's a great thing for them.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And we'll definitely make sure we send everyone that information and provide your contact information. And while we have everyone on, we would just like to ask you guys a few questions. And the first question is, did this presentation meet your needs? If you can just please take a few seconds just to answer that question. Great. Thank you, everyone. Our next question is, how well did this presentation meet the stated objectives? All right, thank you. How likely are you to apply information from this presentation in your organization? Okay, and our final question is, would you recommend this webinar to others? Okay, once again, we would like to thank everyone for attending today's webinar, and our sincerest thank yous to our presenters today. Again, this webinar is being recorded. It will be uploaded to our website in 3 to 5 business days, along with the slides, online resources, and the wonderful videos to share. Thank you again, everyone, and have a wonderful day.
Thank you.